Hey everyone, welcome to Our Small Footprint. My name is Nyssa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. So it is Tuesday afternoon that I'm filming this voiceover. I have my notes for the voiceover for the video, and it was only the most recent video that I had said I was going to try and do things a little bit more regularly and have videos out Sunday morning, Tuesday morning, Friday morning. And then I had a bit of an eventful day yesterday. One of my contract work positions is doing transcription typing, which I've mentioned a few times, and it brings me in a solid income every fortnight. It's not very much, but it's a reliable fortnightly income, unlike things like YouTube and things like that. And I learned all of a sudden that I would lose about 2/3 of the work through there. So yesterday was a little bit messy, a little bit scary, sort of a what if things when I lost 2/3 of that income with one email and no warning and things like that. So we're working through that at the moment. It looks like there'll be a severance pay which will buffer us over for a while, but it was a bit of an emotional sort of a upheaval to happen, and I just didn't feel like I was in the right frame of mind to do a voiceover, so I didn't. So it's now Tuesday afternoon, so this will come out on Wednesday. So there's a lot going to be occurring in the way I'm doing stuff. I'm going to have to pivot a little bit and figure it out, whether I want to go and find another work from home admin typing job, or whether I want to put more work into YouTube and the artwork and the getting recipes out and things like that, and hope that it all comes together and works. Whether I do some work in Darryl's field. So Darryl does converting for virtual tabletops, so Dungeons and Dragons, basically the games that you play in person with books and in front of you. He does the conversions from those to online virtual tabletops. So there is plenty of work in that field that I could probably do with or for him. A lot of the back end stuff is some typing and spreadsheeting and all that sort of stuff, which is what I'm good at. So potentially I pick up some work there and then push more time into doing YouTube and all that, and we will see. It was a bit of a hard day. Everything looks better today. It'll all work out. And like the reason when we moved out here, there was a catastrophic issue that caused us to move out here in a hurry, and maybe this issue here will give me the push to add more time to YouTube and getting the website and getting the recipes, and people request recipe books and all that stuff. Maybe it'll push me to do some of that. So we'll see. Anyway, so today's video is I think it's part 3 of the February food prep from my 6 weekly grocery haul. Really brief quick spiel for anyone who's watching this for the first time. This series for the first time. Shop every 6 weeks, and after that 6-week grocery haul, which I share, I then show all the different ways that we cook, plan, preserve, and use that food to show how we make the whole 6-week shopping work. So this is part 3. There's normally 5 to 7 parts of the video depending on what I purchase for that month, and we're gonna have to try and make things stretch a little bit more. We just borrowed that money for the buildings that arrive on the weekend, plus the added costs of everything else to go along with it, and now I've lost that income, so we're going to be stretched a little thin, but I'm pretty good with money, so we'll just make it work. So anyway, let's get into it. This is part 3. I'm pretty sure it's part 3, and if I'm wrong, I've said part 3 a whole lot of times. But anyway, of the February food prep, planning, preserving, and meals. So the first thing I started with was onion jam. Now these onions I didn't actually buy in this grocery haul. I bought them in the grocery haul prior. I got 2 10-kilo bags for $5, and I just didn't get to doing anything with them in the meantime. There was a couple of rotten ones in there when I went through the bags, but mostly they held up okay. We had them in a dark cupboard, and I was using bits and pieces of them throughout the last 6 weeks, and that sort of, so they were pretty good. But the plan had been to make onion jam. I only had 1 jar left on my shelf. Now, onion jam is basically just caramelized onions, but it's acidified in a way that you can water bath can it. So I'll go into that more a bit later, but it's basically sweet caramelized onions. So you can slice your onions up however you want. You can have them in big rings, you can have them in little rings, you can have them diced up in a food processor, anything you like. There's no real rules on it. You just have to be aware that you're going to caramelize it. So if anyone has, if you've ever made caramelized onions, you know that it's quite a timely process. The smaller the pieces, the quicker it's going to caramelize. So I have one of those big Vivor dicing units. I've used it before in one of my previous videos to make caramelized onion jam, and it works really well, but I now have the slicer for the Thermomix as well, so that's what I used at this particular time. We're not concerned about the consistency of size of slices, it's whatever works. So I just fed it through the chute and sliced it and grated it through the Thermomix in batches. I like the pieces to have a little bit of size on them because I like them to be that nice and soft interior, but when you bite down them there's still a little bit of texture. I don't want it to just go completely to mush. But again, that's a bit of a personal preference there. So I used the Thermomix cutter. I just feed it through the chute, empty it into the pot as I go. Now the recipe is run in 24 cup quantities, and I kind of forgot to, it's 24 cups of your diced onion. The thing is though that onion, like whether you're dicing it, slicing it, chunking it, cup measures are really, really imprecise with, like if you're measuring cups of a product like that. So there's no weights or anything in these recipes that I can find, like no one's worked out what weight they used or anything else. So keep that in mind when you're deciding what you do, and when we acidify it later I'll get into it further, but the recipe comes in ratios of 24 cups in most of the places that you can find it online, and there is approved versions of this recipe around. So I cut all the onion up, got it all in the pot. I forgot to cup measure it, but realistically I knew around about what I was doing, and there was some small pieces, some big pieces, so you know, anyway. Put it in the big pot, added some ghee. So you can add a bit of oil or butter or ghee or whatever. You don't want too much because remember you're going to can it, but this is going to cook off in this amount, and it's just going to help it to get that caramelization started without the onion burning to the bottom of the pot before you get some heat in there. You want to constantly agitate it. So you've got it in the pot, you want to constantly move it around because you don't want it burning, because you don't want burnt bits of onion, you just want caramelized. So it all went into the big pot. We're going to keep a timeline here just so that you're well aware of how long this takes. Got it all in that big pot at about 11:07 a.m. by the timestamp on the video, and this would have been around about 15 kilos of onions. It was about a bag and a half of these onions. Of course, that's 15 kilos with skins and ends on, so it's less afterwards, but about 15 kilos of unpeeled onion. While that's cooking, I made lunch. So we had a couple of bags of potatoes that had some rotten ones in it. This is the problem with the temperatures and keeping potatoes at the moment. So we found a couple of rotten ones in the bags of potatoes, so I wanted to use them because you have to wash the ones that weren't rotten, and once they're washed they do not last as long as if they haven't been washed. Even if you dry them off, they just tend to get like rot spots and stuff like that. So what I did was I did what a standard, I think the Americans call it home fries, to be honest, but don't quote me on that, but I've been told that that's it. So I diced up the potatoes into small chunks, and then I seasoned them with a little bit of oil, smoked paprika, garlic, salt and pepper. And normally I would put them in the cast iron pan, put a lid on the cast iron pan for a while so that they steam through a little bit, and then eventually take the lid off and so that they crisp up all around the outside. Now I bought that air fryer to give a go on the Jackery, and I've been testing out a few different things with it. So I decided what I'd do is I'd put all those potatoes into the air fryer, and that could run because I've got the burner on with the caramelized onions, and then I'm going to use a burner for what we're having with the potatoes. And we do have a small side burner on the barbecue, but it's not particularly efficient. It doesn't heat very well, so because it's only small, so I didn't really want to have to use that, so I thought I'd put the potato in the air fryer. Then I shook that basket really regularly to agitate it through. I grabbed some of the pork that I'd minced yesterday to have with them. I seasoned it with the breakfast sausage seasoning mix, fried it off in the cast iron with some corn. Again, totally need those black beans here. I sprinkled it with a bit of gravy powder, added some water and a bit of coconut cream, and let it thicken up. Now the potatoes have been cooking for this whole amount of time. I'd shaken them, I'd checked them regularly, and I kind of expected them only to take 15-20 minutes, because that's what they say like frozen fries take in like when you buy them to put them in an air fryer. But I would say that I had these on for 30-35 minutes, which is a massive amount of time for potato for the power usage of an air fryer, and they still weren't cooked as well as I'd like. So I definitely won't be doing that again, and I don't know whether that's the air fryer that I'm using or what, but it was a really long time and the potato still wasn't cooked as well as I'd like. So that won't be something that I'll use it again, but I'm still testing these things with it. So all we did was you served the potatoes up and served that mince and corn and gravy mixture over the potatoes, and that was lunch that day. I came back to the onions throughout the day, but this particular one it's 1:53 p.m. so that's 3 hours that these have been caramelized, and I decided that that was a good enough point for me to continue on the process. So when you're making the caramelized onion jam, if I wanted to can these caramelized onions right now, I could, but it would be 40 minutes in a pressure canner to cook them. Whereas if I acidify them, we're only looking at 15 minutes in a water or a steam bath canner. So what I'm going to do is turn them into caramelized onion jam. There's a ratio of balsamic vinegar, apple cider vinegar in that, and as I said, I'll put the ratios in the comments, and it's done in 24 or 48 cup measures is how I normally do it. I actually decided to use double the amount of the acidification that I did for my last batch, which was 48, because I felt like it was about double that amount. I think that was being generous. Like, I think it probably wasn't 96 cups of onion, but I definitely think it was above the 48, under the 96. So I felt like by doubling those ingredients that I would make it into a safe space for canning for my comfort level. I always sort of feel like in something like this, I want to err on the side of too much rather than not enough, because this is a lot of work to get on the shelf, and if I process it and put it on the shelf and it goes bad, then that's a lot of wasted food. So that's how I look at it. You add raw sugar in there, and I put some molasses in there because we didn't have brown sugar. Brown sugar is always tasty. Salt, and then a little maple syrup or maple flavoring works well in there, and then just keep cooking it down until it's got that sort of a jammy, sticky consistency. The liquid is being absorbed and you're back to looking like caramelized onions. So that was about 3:02 p.m. by the looks of it, and it was another hour. So all up, these onions took 4 hours of just stove time, and probably 40 minutes to cut them all up as well. So you're sort of looking at a 4.5-5 hour time span to cook this down for this quantity in one pot, plus all the canning time. I filled all the jars. I've got little 250ml lug lid jars, as well as the 350 odd ml jam jars that I get from Aldi that I like to reuse. Fill them, debubble them really nice and well. So you want to, debubbling is about getting any air pockets out of the quantity that's in there, because the air pockets can impact the headspace left in the jars and things like that. And because of the way the onion sort of curls and wraps around itself, hear those kookaburras? Because of the way it does that, it does trap air bubbles. So you want to debubble it really well. I can't find my packing stick or anything else at the moment, so I just use the end of a plastic spatula to do that, which works fine. Chopstick works as well. We don't use anything metal in the jars because you don't want to risk damaging the jars, but something plastic works well. So I filled all the jars. We're going to clean the rims with white vinegar and put all the lids on. Now, because we've got a bit of video footage here for me to do that, a lot of people ask, what would you use this for? Now for us, we use it for a lot of things. It's really nice on hamburgers with fresh mayo, onion jam, lettuce, tomato, meat patties, cheese. That's like my favorite to have on a hamburger. It's really nice in the bottom of a tart, like if you're making like a puff pastry tart with fresh garden tomatoes and a bit of basil and things like that. A layer of that onion jam in the bottom is really good. A frittata, I always mix it through my eggs in a frittata mix. It's really nice on pizza, so if you put a bit of pizza sauce and then a bit of the onion jam on the bottom of the pizza, that's really good too. But you can just scoop it on things. So like If we're having a toasted sandwich, a little bit of onion jam with cheese, tomato and ham, it's really tasty. Or if you're eating a focaccia and you're dipping it in other things, a little bit of onion jam with it's nice. Crackers with cheese and onion jam, all that sort of stuff. So it's got heaps of uses, and the first time I made it, I think I only did 4 or 5 jars and we ate it super quick. So every time I've made it since, I've bumped up the quantity because it's so much time consuming and so much work to do. It's much better off having that larger quantity done at one time. So I'm going to steam can it in my pressure canner so that I can get it all done at once. So I'm going to do it in 2 layers. Now you need 3 to 4 quarts of water in the bottom of the canner for steam canning, for there to be enough water for up to 40 to 45 minutes of steam canning. That's enough water that it's not going to evaporate in that amount of time. And this caramelized onion jam only takes 15-20 minutes, so we don't need the full amount of water. And because I'm using those small jars, we've got that issue that the water, you want the water level isn't to go over the top of the jars. You want the water level to stay at the under the lid of the jars. So I actually had to pull a little bit of water out because once I added a full layer of those small jars, the water level was too high. So I probably ended up with only 2 quarts of water in there, but that's fine because we're only canning it for a short amount of time. So, you know, that's all good. I put 2 layers in. So first layer, a rack in, first layer in, a rack, the second layer in. They all fit into one canner, which was great. I don't know how many jars I ended up with. I think it was 30 odd. And I'm using the buffalo canner, which fits a whole lot of jars. So that's how it worked anyway. As with steam canning in the pressure canner, anytime I've shown you, you put the lid on, you seal it, you wait for the steady stream of steam and the valve to pop, and once the valve pops, then you can start your timer from that point. Once the time is up, you turn it off. Once the valve drops, then you can open the lid and you can just let it sit there for 5 minutes just to let any remaining steam out, and then take the lid off and put the jars onto a board so that they have 24 hours to rest. That 24 hours rest period is important for the jars. Testing the seals as soon as they get out of the canner is not something you do because some of them will look like they haven't sealed. You need to give them that rest time to seal. I did have one jar that didn't seal, and it's because there was a flaw in the lid. So some of these lids are secondhand and there was a bend in the lid. We've obviously used a knife or something to get that jar open previously. Darryl washed all the lids for me and he didn't notice because it wouldn't be something that he would notice. So one of the jars had a flaw in it and the jar didn't seal. So we had one jar that didn't seal. So I decided that I would use it to make sausage rolls. So I had that other half of the pork that I had minced. I cooked off some celery, garlic and bacon in the pan. Now normally I would add onion at that point too, except that I had these jars of onion, so I used that. So I added the cooked bacon, celery, garlic into the pork mince, and then I added a jar of onion jam, added a couple of eggs. This is about a kilo and a half of mince here, so we're going on about that amount for what quantity we had. Added a dash of Worcestershire sauce, and then decided to add the rest of the jar of onion jam as well, just by looking at the colour and the spread of it through the mince. I mixed it well, and then I added some crumbs. Now you can use whatever crumbs you have, bread crumbs you have. A light fluffy crumb is better than a dense crumb in this sort of a dish, like in sausage rolls like this. So like panko crumbs and stuff like that. We don't buy bread crumbs, so normally I would crumb excess bagels. I really like bagels, sourdough bagels, as a crumb because they have the everything bagel seasoning on them as well. So they make a really nice light crumb, but with that everything bagel seasoning, seeds and stuff in it too. I didn't have anything made up in the freezer, but I have been using our cornflakes in various different ways because it turns out that the kids aren't real keen on cornflakes, and they didn't tell me. So we had a few boxes of cornflakes piled up in the cupboard. So all I did was crumb a box of cornflakes and put them in a jar so that I could use those, and that's what I'm using as the crumb in these. Now I mixed it together, added a bit more crumb. You want it to hold together. You do not want it sloppy, because if it's too sloppy, then when you bake your sausage rolls, at the bottom pastry is going to go soggy. So you want the meat to have a good texture to it, moist but not sloppy. So you know, you add the breadcrumbs to do that. I buy bulk puff pastry from Costco. I cut it in half, put a sausage of the meat down the center of each side, roll it up and seal it. Super, super simple. I cut it to put it on the trays because it cooks quicker. You can cook it in the whole logs if you want, score it, cook it, and then you can cut it afterwards. I also like those really crunchy end bits, and so by cooking them in small pieces, you get crunchy end bits on each piece. Egg washing and sesame seeds is always really nice. but I hadn't been able to find my pastry brush for ages. I actually got one in the mail from a viewer. Thank you very much. So I now have a pastry brush again. I have been looking at buying them, and I just sort of sat there and went, I don't need it that badly. But man, do I use it in a lot of ways that I don't realize until I don't have one. So sausage rolls, a bit of an egg wash, and sesame seeds is always nice, but this time it's optional. I didn't bother doing it this time. While they were cooking, I was testing out some bread ratios. Now, I make a sandwich brioche type bread with eggs in it, and I'm trying to find something that I like that doesn't have eggs in it, and I haven't quite found anything yet, so I'm trying a few different recipes. So this one has honey and butter or oil in it, but no eggs. So I mixed up a big batch of that to give a few different tries of things to do with it, and we're just testing it. This is what the sausage rolls look like cooked. Now, in a family our size, that entire batch of sausage rolls was basically one meal, unfortunately, but that's sort of the way it goes. The dough proofed really quickly because it's yeasted, it's fairly high hydration, it's got the honey in it, the sugar in it, and that sort of thing. I shaped it in a few different ways because we're testing out thing. One of the ways was sort of like a sub style is what I was going for, and then some buns. Everything ended up a little higher than I'd like, so a little bit more bread per item than I aim for. I make a lot of flatbreads because I really like the fact that it's only 40 to 50 grams of dough per flatbread. So when you have two of them, you're only having the same as like a hamburger bun is like a 90 gram, 75 to 90 gram roll sort of thing. And I just don't find that necessary in a lot of ways. The flatbread works really well for that. But anyway, I'm testing things. I'm figuring out what I'm going to do. I'll get back into sourdough now. It's starting to cool down again. But I need to coddle my starter a little bit because it's not real happy or healthy at the moment. So until I get that sorted, yeasted dough is what I've been doing. So I shaped it in some long rolls, a little bit sort of like a sub roll. I did some smaller hamburger style rolls and one in a small loaf shape in my cast iron loaf pan to give them all a go. And now this is after the second proof, so they've doubled up really nicely. They look pretty good. The sub rolls have ended up all sort of joined, but that's fine. I probably should have put them on a baking tray, but the problem is that I can't fit much else in my barbecue if I've got a full baking tray in there, so that's a little bit of a toss up too. This is what they look like after they're baked. Now the loaf was on the surface of the barbecue because of lack of room and stuff. Cast iron got too hot. It burnt the bottom of it. That's fine. I'm going to turn this into breadcrumbs. But the other two worked out fine. Now, it was pleasant. It was white bread. I'm actually not a huge fan of white bread, but I know that the kids really like it. I do like hamburger buns and I do like rolls, but I would prefer them to be flatter. So, like, I put, I don't know, what was it, 16 rolls or something in this with 16 smaller rolls in it. But realistically, I would prefer to put like 8 of them so that they spread out and they were flatter rolls. More filling, less bread, again, as I was saying, but I do run into the problem that I don't have the room in the barbecue to cook the big trays of them and stuff. So I'm going to look into, or I have been looking into, it's kind of put on the back burner a bit now though, a 6-burner barbecue, because at the moment I only have a 4-burner barbecue, and that's where I do all my baking. And so I can only fit a half cookie sheet and then a quarter cookie sheet. That's all the space I've got, or 2 of my cast iron baking trays, that's it. So I'd really like to get one that I could fit at least 2 half cookie sheets in, so that I have the 2 full trays. 4 of my cast iron baking trays would be really nice too, if I could fit 4 across. So yeah, what I'm going to have to do is take those items like into a Bunnings or a barbecue store or something and have a look at the different insides to make sure that the hood will close with them in there and all that sort of stuff. So at some point in the future, that is the plan. We do have the wood stoves that we bought, so we actually ended up buying 2 different wood stoves, like second hand, for 2 slightly different reasons, but we haven't got either of them set up. And part of that is because we don't have anywhere to put them just yet that we can flue in easily. Some of them need some parts. The first one that we bought actually needs some parts and I couldn't find them anywhere, so that's why we ended up buying the second one that's a bit more standard for what's available out there, and parts are easier to get. It weighs a lot more though, so it has caused some issues with trying to get it moved around, and we just don't have anywhere to place it at the moment. We need some concrete pieces down to put it on. It needs to be flued above the roof line so that it draws properly. I don't want it in my kitchen because it would heat the kitchen up too much in summer if I was going to use it for baking in summer as well. So I wanted it sort of just outside of the kitchen, and then we ended up doing these rooms that we're building which is very necessary before we're doing the kitchen space, and so things have gone anyway. It's all a bit of a thing, and I've just completely rambled again because that's what I do. But it's been a big 24 hours, so you'll have to excuse me. So anyway, that was another part of the food prep. Now I have a couple more video content lined up. I just haven't done voiceovers and things like that, and we've got all the buildings and all the building happening this weekend, so I'm going to be recording a whole bunch of stuff. We'll see what I get out in the meantime. I am recording each meal as well because I wanted to share what we used, some of this stuff that we got from the food hamper with. So like we used one of the turkey rolls over the last couple of days and things like that, so I'm going to show you guys how I used that as well. But yeah, so anyway, that's what's going on here at the moment, and that was part 3 food prep for February, and I will see you all guys on the next video. Thanks so much for watching.